Some Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now, there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her. So in the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore, because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now, God is not God of the dead, but God of the living. For to God, all of them are alive. May God bless the reading of this word. So last week we saw Jesus make his way to Jerusalem via Jericho. Remember?
Yes.
Well, a lot has happened in that one chapter of the Gospel of Luke. Here's what happens to Jesus in the interim. Jesus has his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. He stands on a hill and he weeps over Jerusalem. He enters the temple in Jerusalem and drives out all the animal sacrifice merchants and their animals, drives them out of the temple. And it's no small aside, he makes the religious leaders so angry that they want to kill him. Or, as the text says, they wanted to lay hands on him right then, but they were afraid of the people. These are some pretty ticked off people. So why not just get it over with, arrest him? Why? Because the common people were absolutely spellbound by what Jesus was saying. And despite that grumbling of the Jericho people when Jesus ate with that sinner Zacchaeus, the people have watched as rival groups of religious leaders and political leaders have taken turns trying to entrap Jesus with just the right question. And they've marveled that Jesus has, one by one, shot them down. Now, the religious leaders can't take him when he is spouting that liberal agenda that the people love so much. All of that talk about love and acceptance and fairness. That's not popular. I mean, that's all popular with the peasants. And so the religious leaders, they're forced to wait until they can manipulate the public feeling in their favor. So now this is a quest. So they take turns coming to Jesus, trying to trip him up. Do you understand what's happening? So the tension is feeling crazy in Jerusalem with all of these bigwigs trying to get Jesus to trip up. Now eventually, as you know, public opinion does turn in their favor. Even the common people will want to see Jesus killed. But for now, with all of this stuff brewing around Jesus, it's the Sadducees' turn, who come and try to attempt to trap Jesus. Hopefully, they get to win the rivalry. It's kind of like a rivalry. They're all trying to see who's going to be able to get Jesus to trip him. Now, we've talked a lot about the Pharisees, yes? We've talked even about the scribes in the past few weeks, but who are the Sadducees? The Sadducees, in the time of Jesus, were the upper class. They were the rich, They were the elite. Also, they only accepted, and this is very important, the Sadducees only accepted the first 5 books of the Bible. Anybody know what that's called in Hebrew? The Torah. Yes, great. These are those parts that were supposedly written by Moses. Now, in those books, resurrection is never mentioned. So, since the Sadducees only take those as truth or scripture, of course, they don't believe, at least in their interpretation, in resurrection. The Sadducees figured that if God had intended people to be resurrected, God would have told Moses, and then Moses would have told them. Except in their interpretation of scripture, Moses didn't. And so that's why they believed that this resurrection concept was just a fantasy. In fact, they probably thought that the idea of resurrection was just actually sour grapes for those groups and those individuals who hadn't made it to success like the Sadducees had. According to the Sadducees, some people believed in resurrection simply because they were just trying to make something out of themselves, unlike the Sadducees, who had already done it. They had already made it. So go back to the text. These Sadducees, these people who believe there are no resurrection, they come to Jesus, they ask him a question. Moses writes for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up the children for his brother. 7 brothers all marry the same woman in turn. They all die childless. Finally, the woman also dies. Which women in the house, thank goodness, right? 7 brothers. But they ask, in the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? So the Sadducees, believing that there's no God-empowered resurrection, the only way a man, and I say, yes, a man, right, because it didn't matter about women back then, the only way a man could ensure his continued existence was through having children. And if a woman failed to produce the needed children before this man died, the brother of the man would help him by marrying the widow and having the children for his brother. This rule had even been put in the book of Exodus. It was a way of achieving resurrection and longevity of sorts through procreation, since they believed God wasn't interested in maintaining their ongoingness. They would have to take matters into their own hands and do it through their offspring. Is this clear? Amen. The whole thing was driven, of course, by a fear of death. And we don't know anything about that, do we? Fear of death? No. They feared going out of existence. Well, we're going to get back to that in a second. Now, like I said, this question was the question that the Sadducees would use to silence any opponent in a debate, including the Pharisees. Pharisees believed in resurrection, so they were eager to hear what Jesus would say. Jesus doesn't hesitate, doesn't bat an eye. He says, look, only people in this age marry and are given in marriage, but in that age, people don't do that. They don't even die, because they become as angels, as children of God, children of the resurrection. So marriage, says Jesus, is nothing like it is here. God is a God of the living. And then Jesus corrects the Sadducees' interpretation of Scripture and the story of Moses. He says, the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself shows. Moses says that they're raised from the dead. In the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. God is not God of the dead. All of those people are alive in God. Now, Jesus is trying to get them to see that we are in one world order here, right now, where our dualistic thinking comes into play, right? Black or white, right or wrong, good or evil, bad, good, heaven, hell, all of those black and white thinking. Based on our lives, we think that somehow we're going to be sentenced accordingly into the eternity, and that we spend our lives working to amass points for ourselves, comparing our lives to others. Are we good enough? Did we do enough? Did we give enough? How can I look better in God's eyes? These are things that are on our minds. But what happens is that kind of thinking can take us to a very dark place. It can take us to a very self-righteous place. It can take us to a very self-loathing place or a self-focused place. And so, because we don't want to think about that, we practice avoidance. We practice escapism. We become obsessed with our health. We become obsessed with exercise, what we're eating. We monitor every vital sign. We hope to ward death off 1 more year, getting extra 6 months, except every year our birthday rolls around at the same time. Every time we see a loved one pass, every time something happens to remind us of our own mortality, we remember that we are not, after all, successful at our avoidance of death. So instead, we try to secure things for ourselves. Now, if any of this belongs to us in the first place, right? We think and we treat people and things, even the planet, as our property, our wives, our children. We think that somehow we can possess them. We have a right to own them. We have the right to subdue them. What Jesus is trying to point out is that though people here, maybe yes, we craft our whole lives around the fear of death, but in the age to come, meaning after this gateway into death, everyone is important as our wives and our husbands and our children and our neighbors. And I realize fully what I'm saying in this. And I know that people don't necessarily want to hear this. We want to be surrounded, we comfort ourselves that when we die, we will be surrounded by the people closest to us here. And please hear me. I do believe that we will be reunited with loved ones in the afterlife. But I also believe that Jesus is saying that when we die, we open our eyes for the first time and we will be given a new understanding of what loved one means. Love is love. Is love becomes real. And we don't feel that need just to claim one person or one spouse or 2 people or 10 souls as our family. We don't have to have that fear, that feeling of caution. We don't have to have that worry about what's going to happen. We can live in the knowledge needed to understand perfectly all of the emotions that we have here, everything that guides us into right and wrong, all of that in the age to come gives way to only love. Think about how that might play out. If we were to actually take Jesus on his word on that, how differently would we live if we weren't in fear of death, but knowing that in God all are alive? Would it not increase our joy of living here? Would it not take away any need to be angry or aggressive or negative toward one another or toward the planet? What if we read Scripture not as an obstacle to our lives or something that we have to live up to or live into or grow into, and that would stop us from living our best lives? But what if we saw Scripture as an opportunity to live out the life that God has designed for us? To have life and to have it more abundantly, as Jesus says. What if we read it through the lens of love like Jesus did? What if we read the scripture in light of God of love and forgiveness and mercy and all of those attributes, and even the God of cool and fun. We profess to believe that Jesus reveals the true nature of God. Amen?
Amen.
So what if, all along, Jesus has been seeing God very differently than most humans do, and trying to get us to see God that he sees? Jesus is God. You know what Jesus calls God? His Father. Right? Jesus' God is effervescent, to use one of James Allison's favorite descriptors for God. God is effervescent, irrepressible, vivacious, and full of light. The God Jesus sees is full of life, and it is a life so contagious that it can't be contained. It flows out of everything, and knowing this, it changes the way we think, it changes the way we act, it changes the way we approach the earthly end of our lives. That means that resurrection isn't this miracle that just sometimes happens, but actually it's a normal state that happens on account of being full of life, because that's who God is. We live differently. We live richly. We live as resurrected people. Since God is the God of the living, we don't have to worry about dying. We don't have to build our lives based on fear and death. We can live fully every day. We can see and hear that promise through the teachings and life of Jesus, who puts all other scripture in a different light. Look at scripture through the lens of love. Actually, through the lens of love is love is love. And in God there is no darkness at all. God bless you.